Many of the trees in the grove at the corner of this building were blasted to splinters. A few minutes later, over 100 Union guns here along Cemetery Ridge answered. For 2 hours the hills shook during the thunderous barrage. Then the Union officers, believing that the assault would soon follow, ordered their guns to stop firing in order to prepare for it. The Confederate officers, noting the break in Union fire, thought that the Union line was demoralized. A reluctant nod from Longstreet was the signal that sent 12,000 men, rank upon rank, with banners waving, marching across open fields. They didn't rush at first. They marched. The Union guns were silent, waiting. And then suddenly these 12,000 men discovered they were facing a roaring volcano. The Union guns had reopened. The Confederates continued marching until they reached this point. Then they halted, reorganized, and rushed in the face of cannon loaded with canister, like giant shotgun shells. Still they came. Finally, butternut brown uniform melded with the blue in a bloody hand-to-hand conflict. The lines became entangled. Thus did a divided nation drain its own lifeblood. Brothers fighting brothers, each for the cause he thought was right. 50 minutes. 50 minutes. And the greatest infantry charge in our history was history. Of the 12,000 men who started the charge, over half did not come back. In Pickett's division alone, all but 3 of the field officers were dead or wounded, including 3 generals. Entire regiments disappeared. Fewer than 1,000 of Pickett's soldiers answered the next morning's roll call. Note that the Confederate attack was split into 2 columns. The main column here. The smaller column, confused by the smoke, attacked slightly to the south. 2 Union regiments, consisting of troops from the state of Vermont, daringly advanced into the gap created in the Confederate lines. They wheeled to the right, facing north, and raked the flank of the larger Confederate column. Then the Vermonters did an about-face, fired south, and tore up the flank of the smaller column. These 2 small regiments effectively demoralized the flanks of Longstreet's 2 columns. The Confederates fell back to Seminary Ridge. The final maneuver at Gettysburg occurred 5 miles east of the main battlefield. Several brigades of Union cavalry under General David M. Gregg were patrolling those fields. One of these brigades was commanded by a 24-year-old brigadier general, George Armstrong Custer, who would later make a last stand against the Sioux Indians in Montana, the Battle of Little Bighorn. Lee ordered the famous Confederate cavalryman Jeb Stuart, who had come onto the field from the north, to swing around the Union right to a position behind the Union Army, to have his cavalry in position behind the Union lines when Pickett's troops broke through. There would then be infantry in front, cavalry poised in the rear. Lee intended to use his cavalry to complete the Union route once Pickett broke through. But Stuart ran into trouble. When he reached this area, he was spotted. He came into line of battle to find the 2 Union brigades blocking his front. He sent forth his first units as snipers and skirmishers. One of the Confederate brigades ran out of ammunition and was compelled to withdraw. The remainder of the Confederates advanced and were caught. The Union troops were firing on them from 3 different angles. Stuart, hampered in his movement, ordered the Confederates to withdraw. He left the field to the 2 Union brigades and retired. The last Confederate thrust at Gettysburg had been made. The high water mark had been reached. Though the war would bleed on for 2 more years, the Confederate cause, for which her sons had fought so bravely, was doomed. The following day, July 4th, the 2 armies sat, facing each other, nursing their wounds. During the evening of July 4th, in a pouring rain which must have reflected their mood, Lee, Longstreet, Ewell, Hill, Stuart, the entire Confederate Army started the withdrawal that ended the bloodiest event to ever take place on the American continent. 51,000 soldiers, Americans all, 30% of the armies involved were casualties in the 3 days of bitter fighting. We direct your attention to the shape of the Union line, the famous fishhook formation at Gettysburg. If you keep a picture of the fishhook in your mind, you can better understand the battlefield when you make your tour. We are located where the hook begins to bend. It bends through the National Cemetery, back over Culp's Hill, with the point of the hook near Spangler Spring. The shank, or long end of the hook, begins here at the Visitor Center and follows south along the crest of Cemetery Ridge, past the high water mark, Vermont Monument, Pennsylvania Monument, Minnesota Monument, Little Round Top, and ends at Big Round Top. Keep this in mind. You can keep your directions in order as you tour the battlefield. 4.5 months after the battle, on the evening of November 18th, President Abraham Lincoln came to Gettysburg for the dedication of the Gettysburg National Cemetery. Now, with the armies far away in Virginia, the lights of the town and farmhouses burn throughout the countryside. The President spent the night at the David Wills residence. Here he completed the final draft of the speech he was to deliver the following day. The next morning, November 19, 1863, as the few thousand people that were to share in one of the greatest events of history were gathering on the streets of this little town, Lincoln emerged, mounted a horse, and rode to the cemetery, using the road that passes in front of this building. Amid the neat rows of freshly dug graves and a few carefully chosen phrases of dedication, he defined for all Americans the lesson of so much bloodshed. The world, he said, can never forget what they did here. It is for us to highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
We hope you've enjoyed the Electric Map program. At this time, please exit through the lighted doors on your left or right on the upper level of the auditorium. Please remember to gather all personal belongings as you leave your seats, and enjoy the rest of your visit to Gettysburg. Thank you.